I want to begin by saying I am not a cradle Episcopalian. My religious DNA from my parents was Christian Science and New England Congregationalist. My parents moved to Durham, North Carolina from Massachusetts in 1935. Every summer we spent at my grandfather's in Wakefield, Massachusetts. My spiritual journey began in the summer of 1941 when I was baptized at the age of 6 months in the First Congregational Church in Wakefield. That was our last summer for a visit for many years because at the end of that year, World War II broke out in our country. We lived out in the country, but my parents instilled in us the importance of going to church every Sunday. We attended the closest church to our home, which was 4 miles towards town, again because of the rationing of gasoline. And it was a Baptist church, and we attended that until I was 7 years old. My Baptist Sunday school laid the foundation of learning and loving exciting Bible stories in the Old Testament and the stories of the birth of Jesus, his baptism in the river, that was important, and feeding the 5,000 and holding little children on his lap. I do not remember learning about Jesus' death or how he died, but on Easter he rose, and I got new Sunday shoes and an Easter bonnet. In the 2nd grade, at age 7, we became members of the First Presbyterian Church in Durham. Why? I asked my parents. Because it's more like our beliefs. There, my spiritual foundation was fortified by wonderful Sunday school teachers, memorizing Bible verses, communicants classes at the age of 12, joining the church, which gave me the privilege of taking communion, that was made of little squares of Wonder Bread and tiny little glasses of grape juice that were passed down the aisle in a beautiful silver tray. I loved communion Sundays. At that time, it was only 4 times a year, and a bonus one on Monday, Thursday. We had children's choir, youth group meetings every Sunday evening. It was total immersion, though not in water. However, as a typical teenager, church was perhaps more of a social event rather than exploring beliefs or what it means to be a Christian. Then came college. And in today's language, I'm sorry to say that those were gap years in my church attendance. Although some of my favorite classes were in the religion department at Duke. Marriage brought me to Western Pennsylvania. And with the birth of my first child, dear friends, my surrogate parents urged me to return to church now that I had a child, and they invited me to join them at their Episcopal Church. My gap years were over, and my adult spiritual journey began in earnest with the birth of my son and another daughter whom I was expecting 8 months pregnant when I was confirmed as an Episcopalian by Bishop Varga of the Diocese of Pittsburgh. My children to me were proof of real life miracles, of perfectly put together little ones. What did appeal to me about the Episcopal Church at this point in my life? One was the reverence. Kneeling when I first went into the church and praying on my knees. Kneeling through the prayers and kneeling in the Eucharist. Intentional walk to take the Eucharist to the altar instead of sitting in my pew. Exchanging the peace. And one thing that meant a lot, because my 3 children were baptized there, were the words of the baptismal covenant and how it involved not only the parents and the godparents, but everyone in the congregation who vowed to uphold my children in their spiritual journey. Another appeal to me is the Liturgy of the Episcopal Church, repeated each Sunday, but always taking on new meaning. The words in the liturgy that especially appealed to me and jumped out at me on my very first visit, and I'll never forget, was the opening prayer, when our hearts are open and from whom no secrets are hid from God. Confession words that we have sinned against thee by what we have done and left undone. And the poignant words of the Eucharist, especially, he stretched out his arms upon the cross and offered himself as a living sacrifice in obedience to God's will. The words of comfort that are in Rite 1, especially come unto me, all ye that are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Those words of comfort had special meaning in 1918, when our son at age 48 died of a heart attack. I moved to Hershey in November of 2019 and found All Saints. 3 months later came COVID, and so much happened during the following 1.5 years. Assumptions, beliefs were challenged, but when I returned to attending church in real time, inside the sanctuary, I found belonging and peace. A visit from Kathy, bearing a gift of friendship soup, convinced me that I have found a new church family. So, what have I learned on my spiritual journey? My spiritual DNA is not from a particular denomination or a particular church. It comes from God, who created all humans in his image. God, in his abundant grace, is the heart of my DNA, which I share with my new church family and all of humanity. And thank you for welcoming me. I have a name tag.